From your research of Bram Stoker's original notes, what details can you share about the development of the original Dracula that fans might not know?
Let me start with that, and then Ian jumped in, because it was Ian's idea to say, Dacre, going up to this Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia and see what you can do. And at first I thought, well, this has to be a secret mission, but it didn't, because this is a very special library and museum that, if you're a serious sort of scholar, and as it turns out, a Stoker, or anybody else that really has serious pursuits on mind, you can get access to these notes. They have since then been published by Elizabeth Miller and Robert 18 Binzang in a really cool annotated manner that now the world can order this book and see his notes and see how they relate to his story. Well, what we did first, we were in awe to see Bram's handwriting from 112 some odd years ago. First of all, the writing was terrible, because apparently he wrote thousands of letters in his job as a manager of Lyceum Theater, so the writing was hard to decipher. But it needed to be known that he just jotted down thoughts, random thoughts, as he was creating this story over a 7-year period. And these thoughts had ideas from superstitions, from mythologies, from a ton of research that he did in the British Museum and Library, from the Whitney Museum, from his trips to America, different newspapers that he read. Some are typed, some are handwritten, drawings. And what was interesting to me, before we sort of unleashed on what didn't make it into his book, he created a vocabulary for what people in Yorkshire would say. He had all these different costumes and vocabulary of what gypsies would say in these Slavic countries, because if you remember, he never traveled there. So he had to get information from travel logs and travel books and different stories from people and write all these things down so he could then write a novel from it. So that's one of the things that sort of gathered me, is a tremendous amount of knowledge that he puts down in sort of lousy handwriting that eventually becomes his story. One final thing I'll say before I let Ian give his piece is that as a Stoker, what I thought was also particularly cool was that his brother, William Stoker, was actually quite a famous doctor. He was a couple of years older than Bram, but Bram utilized his knowledge to look into brain surgery, because William was an all-around surgeon, did some brain surgery work, and in these notes, sitting up in this museum, William actually had done some drawings of the brain, and this turned out to be used in a chapter when dealing with the mad patient Renfield, who gets beaten up by Dracula in the asylum in Whitby, and Stewart has to perform, funnily enough, brain surgery on him. Ian, what do you think? We got out of that stuff.
What I found interesting about the notes was how the story evolved. Bram worked on this story over 5 years, at least. He was obsessed with this story. I mean, this novel was something special to him, and I think, part of it we touch on in the book that, from our point of view, it was, he always had a competition with Oscar Wilde, and I think, Dorian Gray was the classic Gothic novel up to the point that Dracula became popular. So I think he was trying to match Oscar Wilde, and he was putting, Oscar Wilde even dated Bram's wife, Florence, where they were married, yeah. Florence. So he had an ongoing competition with him, and I think he fertilized this book because he knew it was his big idea. When you look at the notes, you see him cross out different names for Dracula, Dracula, which is the Romanian spelling, and Vampire, and Count Vampire, and he, the undead, and he has all these different titles and names and for everything, and he keeps playing with it until he got it right. All these characters that he had that didn't make it into the book do wind up in Dracula the Undead. So we kind of completed Bram's vision, you might say.
Yeah, the other thing that is interesting is that in the notes, and a lot of people have drawn for speculation, that was he intending to do a stage play about it, because of course this was Bram's life at the time. Ian talks about all the time it took to write it. Well, he had a full-time job as a manager for the Lyceum Theater and a personal manager for Sir Henry Irving, who was the Shakespearean actor of the time. So this is in between his full-time job in the stage, and you literally see in certain pages, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and so it looked like okay, was he originally intending to do this, because this is his life in acts, to make it a play? And then the final thing is some of the notes are literally on his day timer that has the days and hours, and he was so meticulous with all of the things he did in his life as a theater manager and managing all of these people's lives, that when he managed the movement of the characters in his novels, that the research that both of us have been talking about also figured out the accurate train schedules for people in the novel to move, of course, in England.
And the exact time it took for them to get from one place to another.
Exactly. So the accuracy and tide schedules and so on else were also very strictly researched and very accurate.
Dracula is one of the most popular Penguin classics. What makes Dracula a classic?
Well, technically, I don't really know. I just imagine that here's a book that's never been out of print since 1897, okay? 29 languages. It's studied to this day in high schools and colleges. So just the longevity and where it keeps popping up, I think, would qualify it at least for status as a classic.
For me, there are stories that ride the zeitgeist. Something's going on in our culture, and that story hits that culture, and it just sails along. But those stories are of the moment. Stories like Dracula create the zeitgeist. It changed our culture. We suddenly, found ourselves enthralled with this book, and it became part of our everyday lives. And that's what makes it, for me, a classic, is it didn't just ride the zeitgeist, it created it.